Hey everybody, this is a long time coming for the weapon guide. People keep sending me videos about how the Cronos weapon is better than the Milky Way, and I keep seeing the worst tests I have ever seen uh, to demonstrate the difference between the Cronos and the Milky. They're generally very poorly crafted. They're usually done with low awaken items. And like a Milky and a Kronos are both extremely long-term investments for most players, and it's not even remotely close. The Kronos weapon is currently in need of a massive buff, in my opinion, on the global version, at least. In the Korean version, they actually have a regular 4-star dark weapon that doesn't give damage to light monsters. It gives crit rate. They do not have a Milky weapon. The Koreans all went for Kronos because it was the super rare. It gives higher accuracy rating and higher crit damage. I believe they also didn't have the Decimation weapon. There was no 4-star super rare for Dark Element for the longest time. They do have the Decimation now, which means most people are probably running Kronos, Decimation, and the 4-star regular Dark Spear for their builds. That would be what my guesses would be for the top whales, or some of them might be using perhaps the basic skill damage increase weapon. But this is going to vary a little bit based off class. But I do want to kind of get into this because it really makes a big deal for Imprint. So we're going to start with the Kronos versus the Milky first. The first thing that you need to consider when you're doing comparisons between these weapons, if you have this 7% accuracy rate subline, it's usable. If you don't have it, it's not usable on either piece. I'm actually using the 3-star gloves currently for the accuracy rate. Where I am, because these monsters seem to have like 120% ish accuracy rating, evasion rating. So if I equip like my Berserker gloves, for example, I'll just leave this for a while. You'll probably notice it's pretty rare because one of my pieces is super rare, but I'll probably start missing here or there. Oh, there's a couple misses right there, and a couple more misses right there, and that kind of really just annoys me. Because I think that you also have like possibly a smaller, like a more narrow damage range. I haven't done a lot of testing with it, but I think that the accuracy rating does affect a few more things than just, well, sometimes I miss. But the baseline evasion rating of the mobs that you fight, which in the newest highest level of the Chaos Field, is kind of a big deal. So that first thing that you got to know is the 7% subline is more important in the early game to even use this. If you do not have it, you're going to need to get your theater buff from your shop, your theater shop in your guild, or you're going to have to use these 3-star gloves and just forego the small amount of DPS increase you would get from something like the Berserker gloves or whatever. I like the Berserker gloves; they are my favorite gloves in the game. For the Milky versus the Kronos comparison, this is going to be upsetting a lot of people. The attack speed increase is not a strong stat. It may look like it because you see your character moving a little bit faster, and that does feel nice and fun. But point for point, attack speed versus damage increase actually comes out on top in this game. It might not show all the time on a weaker enemy. I see a lot of people doing dummy tests versus very weak dummies, like the regular 30-second practice mode, which is just a level 1 defenseless dummy. You should be trying to scale that up for the level of the mob that you're targeting. Attack speed increase is going to give you more consistency in your damage, because this is just going to be kind of like a straight thing across the board, and you can always get it. So you can expect the numbers to be hovering around the mean if you did a bunch of average tests. The Milky, especially at lower awaken, when your crit rate's only around 10% to 13% if you got awaken 3, it's going to be a little bit more bipolar. You're going to see some really obscenely high numbers if you have like a crazy lucky run, or maybe some low numbers depending on what it comes out to. But if it comes down to a fight, for example, in PvP, the bipolar outcome is going to be better because you'll randomly have your Kona, for example, crit, and then it'll do way more damage to your target. So like this type of bipolarity is going to give you more opportunities created than the small damage, so the skill casting speed increase for PvP. Because if you did not know, the Cronos weapon does increase the speed at which your basic skills and special skills do come out. It's not just the basic attack damage, basic attack movement speed. But in terms of straight damage, this weapon is actually stronger than the Cronos weapon at low awaken. I don't know at what point the Cronos weapon passes it. I assume that if this is awaken 10, the Cronos passes it once it gets to awaken 7 and unlocks the crit damage subline. But the crit damage subline on a Cronos weapon is it's not a good stat. Without the Milky Way, you really have no access to the crit damage substat. And the higher you get in awakening levels on your Milky, you get a full percent of crit rate every single level to a maximum of 20. I'm 2 pieces away from getting my Awaken 7. Once it's Awaken 7, I think I will be focusing more on Cronos for like selectors and things like that I get. That is my plan right now. But at this point in time, it's pretty obvious that the Milky is a lot better. So the first thing I want to show is just the different skills that we have. First, we have this perfect chance skill. This is one of the few ways to get crit rate in the game. If you're setting up your combo, this is a fantastic skill to have if you're trying to be more aggressive. If you're being a little bit more defensive, perhaps quick overcome is the way that you should go. But perfect chance is going to give you a tremendous amount of crit rate increase. And what we're trying to do with crit rate is trying to get a decent amount. There's foods you can eat and things like that increase your crit rate, but you really want to get past the 25 to 30% crit rate point to have extraordinarily consistent crits, which will just start blowing the Cronos out of the water, and it won't be close. So a skill like this gives crit rate. Now, a skill like Rapid Pulse, for example, it gives, and this is basically up all the time. This is one of the best witch skills in the game. It gives attack speed increase already and crit damage increase. Well, if I don't have a Milky, I'm not making use of this crit damage increase stat. And if I don't have a Milky, this attack speed increase is not being watered down by excess other sources of attack speed. So this is very strong as well. The Cronos at Awaken 3, and I do want to use Awaken 3 as a baseline here. I don't want to use the base amount. So we're going to go with the 16.25% increase. Well, if you have Rapid Pulse on, and if you are somebody who does like the conditional perks, what is it? Is it the daily premium? Which one? Yeah, this one. This gives 8% attack speed as well. So that's already more attack speed than the Cronos is going to give. So at Awaken 3. So I could basically double this value, which is good value if you know much about like how the multiplication for the modifiers is going to go. That is going to be like a pretty significant increase. However, the relative value of the Cronos is being watered down by these excess sources of attack speed. If you have many other sources of attack speed, 1 point in attack speed is, well, in this case, since I already have 18% attack speed, as you see, it's being watered down by about half. If I didn't have that skill equipped, and if I didn't have the daily sign-in pack for the other, if I don't have that 18%, then that 16% attack speed from the Cronos is actually going to be weighted very high. But we have other issues. Well, what about the skills that are in favor of the Cronos weapon? All right, let me just go back over here. So we have things like critical flow, deadly tempo, and exquisite sense. Now, exquisite sense is one of those things where if you're lucky and you get a bunch of them, you're lucky, because this does give you a free 100% crit. Now, this is going to be extremely powerful with the Cronos weapon. So perhaps you would run that instead of Rapid Pulse. But I still think that Rapid Pulse is a stronger skill, to be honest. Exquisite Sense basically gives you 1 extra basic attack for every 8 hits. So every let's say every 2 cycles you get 3 extra basic attacks, and by 2 cycles I mean like you do all your basic attacks, your cooldowns come up. If you're wearing like the Berserker gloves, for example, you get 2 casts of your basic skills, you get an extra 3, which is actually quite strong. It is a basic attack, but we are witches in this example. And I'm going to be tilting a lot of this towards the Witch, because that is the class that I play. There might be different results and different skills depending on the other classes that you are playing. But as the Witch, this is going to be a great skill to have maxed if you are heavily invested in Cronos. I do feel that it is not as strong as Rapid Pulse just in general. This gives 10% attack speed and 20% crit damage. It's basically always up. The 50% chance to activate on attack is very high. The perfect chance, this is more of a PvP thing. You generally like to set up your skills by having somebody stunned, knocked down, or subdued. So this would basically always be on, and that extra crit rate, like they don't give anything else, just the crit rate. This is a very strong skill. It's going to make your damage explode on people by having it equipped. Critical Flow is one that you need to get a critical hit, and it gives you attack speed. Now, if you invest in this and you get it to 10, it will. Now, this is another long one. Maybe some people pick this if they got those whale packs that came up in the shop recently. But this gives another 10% attack speed on critical hit. Now, the 5-second cooldown means it can't be up 100% of the time, but it is another source of another 10% attack speed. And that is going to help all your other things proc more often as well. But this, again, just waters down attack speed. This is another one. Deadly Tempo. When you kill an enemy, the attack speed increases. Again, we're watering down attack speed with many other different sources. And it kind of is getting to the point where there's a lot of things that are going to give attack speed. Obviously, in party, there's other skills that other party buffs give that will increase attack speed as well. You could have combinations of these things. If you're in it with another witch could trigger this to buff the entire party. And then you could have maybe a critical flow on if you're doing a field boss or something like that. There's too many sources of attack speed to give the Cronos high value. My honest opinion, I think that the Cronos should be probably around 40% attack speed increase, maybe even 50 after I've done a lot of tests. If I could ever have one max and they do double it and just make it up to 50 like the other super rares, and maybe make Milky Way 25% crit rate or 40% crit rate or something like that to be up there with the other super rares like the regular PvE ones. That might be a little bit nutty, but I just think that there's too many sources of attack speed for the attack speed not to be heavily watered down. And this is really important because a lot of people are going to be imprinting and they're going to think to themselves, well, the Cronos weapon is one of the best weapons in the game. And based off some tests that I saw on YouTube, like at low awaken levels on level 1 dummies or whatever the issue is or whatever the mistake the person made, I saw one video today, actually, just by way of example, and I won't say any names or call anybody. I don't want to be starting like a YouTube drama thing because I'm not planning to be a YouTuber. I'm just sharing information that I have. But they were doing tests with multiple things off and then multiple things on and trying to do things. Everything was low awaken. The low awaken actually really favors the Cronos in the example. It kind of like because the Cronos is more consistent in terms of the game, and it gets half of its potential gain right off the hop. The crit damage subline is basically a dead stat for the Cronos weapon in a 1-to-1 comparison, but the crit damage stat for the Cronos for the Milky weapon was being left out in every single one of those tests. So you have one of your weapons in every single test doesn't have a crit damage subline on the third weapon, or on any weapons, or however the weapons were arranged. But that crit damage subline hurts the Milky. Also, the Milky is not being able to. The Cronos is not suffering anything because it gets half of its value right at Awaken 0. The Milky doesn't get more than half of its value at Awaken 0. The Milky gets maybe 15 to 20% of its value at Awaken 0. And that's if we don't consider imprinting, because imprinting is a whole other issue, which I should probably go into now. The imprinting in this game, for the most part, will give you elemental attack. Okay, this is really, really, really important. Imprinted attack, 1500. That is nothing. 5,400 element attack, though, and then 30% increase of that element attack. So an Awakened 10 Milky has 2,400 darkness attack, so this would be 7,800, and then you get 30% more of that. So the 7,800 times 30%, so that's another 780 times 3. So you got about 10,000. You have about 1000 darkness attack and only 1500 basic attack. Now, why is that important? Because of the weapons in the game that you're going to be using for PvP. There's 2 dark super rares that are the best weapons in the game. Everybody should, at one point in time, hope to be able to get enough Astrite to be able to get a Decimation weapon to Awaken 3 one day far, far off into the future. We can say that here, even though it seems a little unreasonable for people to be able to acquire Astrite weapons. Because these weapons are actually less acquirable than the Astrite shop weapons. The Astrite shop weapons, if you can save up the Astrite, you can kind of plan that. But basically, without giveaways or free selections, these are once every 400 pities or whatever, or 200 if you're using gems. Most people, I think, are not going to be using gems to do big summon sessions. They're going to be doing the tickets that they get over here and over there, and like over long periods of time. It's 400. It's 1 in 400 to pull one for one. Is it to get a super rare? That's the rate of the super rare drops. And then if you do get the super pity, it's like, okay, well, how many super rares are there? I really hope it's my Milky, or I really hope it's my Cronos. I actually just got my first Cronos the other day, and I've been playing since basically I think 6 or 7 days after launch is when I started in global. But these are less attainable to some people and more attainable to others, I guess. It should be kind of even. But the Decimation weapon does give damage to player, which is obviously the strongest stat in this game for PvP. It's damage reduction from player is probably a little bit stronger. But damage to player is also very powerful and for a weapon. Now, you will run this weapon in the super, super long term of the game. You will run this weapon. You will probably run the Cronos weapon or the Earth weapon, and you will run a Decimation weapon. That is what most players are going to do in the super, super long If you're playing this game for years, this is the outcome that is going to eventually you'll find yourself in. You'll be in. That will give you 2 weapons that have dark. You're not going to use a light weapon as your PvP element when you have 2 weapons that are dark that are giving a potentially 20,000 more darkness attack. You're not going to cut away 10,000 darkness attack. Now, you might think, well, hey, the player doesn't have a light element. It doesn't do anything. That is incorrect. The element that you have actively equipped is applied to your attack. And the only mitigation that your enemy has is the defense of that element and then their actual defense. These things are calculated separately. Having a disparate, a disproportionate amount of element attack to the element defense of the person who you are attacking, that gives you a large damage increase. And nobody is going to go with a light weapon long term. There's going to be a lot of the whales that are just doing everything and they want to have all their stuff 90 maxed. Like, they're going to do what they're going to do. They got money coming out of their asses. For everybody else who it really matters what you imprint, the Cronos is going to be a terrible decision long term. Now, when is the Cronos going to be better than the Milky? Well, my Milky's at 50. My Earth Spear's at 42. If my Light Spear gets to 50 as well, since this is my 3 PvP are the Fire, the Milky, and the Earth. If my Light Spear happens to pop off and goes to 50 as well, then I will consider enhancement transferring this to the Cronos weapon and investing in my Cronos weapon. After a certain amount of attack, because of the way the enhancements work in our version of the game, damage stops mattering basically at all. It just doesn't matter. The only people that I can't consistently kill relatively easily are people like Fat Pappy or Liar Spoker or Pancakes or Plaid, like the people that at the very tip top of global. They've all got like Awaken 10 asteroid armor, and like their damage reduction is in the 30 to 40% range. 43 for some of them, which is the max amount of damage reduction that you could expect if somebody's running Molten Lion and it's Awaken 7 or higher, and they have a Kona and they have a Rimu. They'll have 7% reduction from Rimu, 6% from Molten Lion, and then they'll have 30% reduction from the Astrite PvP armor, which is extremely overpowered. It's basically, if you are at that 43% range, it's basically like doubling your health nearly, which is huge. It blows this HP gaining armor out of the water, I think this is a big trap. Maybe I'll do another video on that later. But that is kind of just where I want to sit with things right now. Like the biggest reason is just by way of summary that the Cronos is going to get blown out of the water by the Milky is one, dark is just a way stronger element than light. Also, if you weren't aware, rings, when you imprint them, will give the element attack of the thing that drops them. A pretty significant amount. A super rare gives around 2,800, I believe. So if you have the Stellia super rare ring, that's that. There are no light attack sources for ring, which means you will not use a light ring for PvP, which means you will not use a light element for PvP. You see a lot of people imprinting their necklaces. This is the thing that they kind of did in Korea because, again, they don't have the level of enhancement potential that we have in North America. We have had quite a lot of luck with our 50% system. The 1,080 attack that you get here is phenomenal. It is a lot of attack. But that's how much attack I got from getting my necklace from 40 to 41. So I said to myself, I wasn't going to enhance past 40, and I said to myself, well, I'll try one more, because if it succeeds, that's basically a 90 imprinted necklace, because the crit and accuracy are kind of negligible. And it succeeded, so there. This is my 90 imprint level 40 necklace. That's what I'm going to call it from now on. And that's done. Now, I can get elemental attack from my ring, because I do main fire as an element right now, because dark is going to be a super long-term thing for me, because I don't have a decimation weapon. My Milky is 50, which is great, but fire is the most available element, especially because this ring right now. These Vulcan earrings, a lot of people are going to main Earth. This gives a tremendous amount of Earth defense, which is, again, these are things that you need to consider when you're picking your main PvP elements. And this gives a tremendous amount of darkness defense, which is probably the biggest nerf to the Milky in the game. If everybody runs these super long term, the Milky and the decimation, you'll get a huge amount of dark defense. I think this is probably the number one thing to imprint. If you're going pure straight for damage, the number one thing would probably be like the Vulcanord ring or the Stellia's ring, depending on what your PvP element is. That's just for accessories, obviously. But the last thing I just want to say, because this video is getting a little bit long, if you think that the Milky weapon is weaker than the Cronos weapon, you're doing your math wrong. It's not even remotely close. You want to be able to get, like, crit is the most scarce stat in the game, and if you can get yourself up to like a 30% crit rate or something like that, a 1 in 3 crit, like a fixed crit. Like, forget this crit stat here. This crit stat is garbage. Okay, it basically only works if you have like a massive level of advantage over the person that you're fighting. And it's very easily nullified with crit resist. As you can see, I'm stacking crit resist right now. So my crit resist blows my crit out of the water. I don't want to get crit by anybody. But this base crit rate cannot be avoided. I think crit resist rate, this percent, this can nullify some of it. I believe, I'm not 100% sure, but I believe that that's how those two would interact. Because usually the percent values are differently calculated than these. These are kind of sub numbers inside the formula. They're not major multipliers in the formula. Okay, that's it. Yeah, so the main thing you got to remember, crit is basically better than attack speed at all levels of the game that the item will be usable. Oh, you know what? There is one last thing I did forget to say. It matters how you set up your decks, because there is going to be a best way to set up every single deck. And unfortunately, and this is why Milky should win in the long run. Milky gives you higher potential output of damage when you hit a target. The way defense works in this game, it's kind of like a flat amount of reduction. It's a very simplistic formula. I don't know what exactly, but it's very simplistic. You will notice this if you ever get your first 35 or your first 40 enhance on a weapon. But you'll say to your friends who have 40k attack or 35k attack, hey, how many hits can you, how much damage can you do to this thing, this mob? Like, how many basic attacks does it take to kill you to farm this group of mobs? Wow, 12 hits? I'm doing it in 3. Why am I 4 times stronger than you when I'm only 20% more attack? It's because their defense of those targets is eating up all of the damage. So once you get past that defense threshold, basically every enhancement level is money. It's just pure gain all from that point in time. Again, like I said, if I can get my Cronos to like 50, my Light Spirit to 50, then my attack is so high that more damage is just kind of not necessary for me. At least in relation to having my skills come out slightly faster, which a lot of people could argue, well, damage is probably always going to be kind of good. So maybe the skills coming out a little bit faster is, your special skills have really long cooldowns. Your basic skills have relatively short cooldowns. But it's not something that you could do all of the time. And a lot of the time, if they're not casting simultaneously, you don't really have an advantage. But still, it does seem to be a lot better to have your stuff come out faster compared to not. That's just my opinion right now. But I think that is the value of the Cronos weapon. Having your stuff come out faster once you have hit an attack threshold where damage kind of is unimportant. I just completely sidetracked there. So I did the defense mitigation thing, which obviously very heavily favors the Milky. If you haven't done that math in your head, what I'm trying to say there, this is why the level 1 dummy is kind of nonsense. Doing the same, let's say the DPS was exactly even, for example, between a Cursed Guardian Spear and a Cronos weapon. Let's say the damage was perfectly matched, 30% damage increase, 25% attack speed increase. Let's say that the damage versus the attack speed, there was no outside factors. It was this spear versus this spear. This should edge it out because the damage by a 1.3 modifier versus a 1.25 modifier, this should win. Just barely, but it should win. Like the odd critter here or whatever might make it a little bit different, but the Fire Spear should just beat the Cronos weapon. Now the Cronos weapon at Awakened 10 will have slightly more attack, but that's not really going to be that important compared to the 5% difference. Because in this example, like I said, the crit damage is basically not really going to be happening unless you have other skills that's going to be guaranteeing you a crit, like Exquisite Sense. So the fire weapon should just beat the Cronos straight up at Awakened 10. It definitely does at Awakened 3. What's surprising is the Earth weapon beats it at Awakened 3, which is... I knew for sure the fire weapon would, but I was surprised when I found out that the Earth weapon beats the Cronos. An Awakened 3 Cronos loses to an Awakened 10 Earth Spear. I thought that was actually quite surprising. But damage is... the stronger the enemy is, the more defense reduction it is. Having fewer hits that hit more is really going to amplify the amount of damage you do, because after you get past that certain defense threshold, you're just getting money hits. It's just boom, boom, boom. All that extra damage is a lot of extra damage. And then taking that away for attack speed, if you don't have an excessive amount of attack, well, you're not taking away the 30% damage increase. Maybe you're taking away 70 or 80% of the amount of increase because you were just barely on the cusp of being able to break through the enemy's defense. Maybe your basic attacks are only doing 5, 6, 7k per hit or something like that because you've taken away that damage increase. Whereas if you had the 30% damage increase over everything, it goes up. Now there will be sweet spots as well if you are on the edge, because this is damage increase, so you have to be able to do the damage before this amplifies. Which is why this beats the Cronos just straight up, in my opinion. Because let's say I do get the 50 Cronos. Is it going to be better than the Fire Spear if I got my Fire Spear to 50 as well when I'm grinding mobs? Probably not, because 30% more damage is going to really blow out the water compared to the attack speed. The attack speed is going to be, that's going to be more complicated math. I'm going to have to see how many actual attacks it takes me to kill mobs, the groups of mobs that I'm killing, like I'm killing these ones here. If I can move over and kill these ones slightly faster, and it's relatively the same amount of basic attacks over the same period of time, because my attack is so high, then, or perhaps 2 hits brings the mobs down to like 1 sliver of health, and I need a 3rd hit anyway, and the Cronos does it in 3 hits as well. Like there's going to be situations where one is better than the other, but it's going to be based off of every individual person's account. Overall, for most players, damage increase is going to be better all of the time. And like I said, this weapon here, especially if you have a Milky, because the Milky fits in every single. It unlocks the crit damage substat. You don't have crits without the Milky. The only crits you have are from Exquisite Sense as a witch. So this is the only way to make use of the crit damage substat. And by the way, your crit damage substat, like baseline, does start at around like a 1.7x multiplier, and the crit damage increase rate. This is not like, let's say my crit damage 1.7, and then it's plus this 76 or whatever it is. It's actually not that. The increase rate is 76% more. So you'd take that 1.7 multiplier and you would multiply it by 1.76. So it works to be about 30% less of the amount that is said here. So that is kind of like a hit to the Milky, but the having something that's going to double your damage on random hits, roughly 30% of the time, is if you have like a perfect chance or whatever in PvP, like it's going to be a lot more. A lot more. Anyway, this video is like very rambly and very long. If you have any questions or anything, put them in the comments below. I'll try to respond to them as best as I can if I'm free. You could always whisper me in game if you are on the Jade Cancer server. But please do not invest in your Cronos weapons over your Milky weapon. It's very obvious that the game is heavily tilted towards dark, earth, and fire as main elements, at least at this stage in the game, unless there's a significant buff to the Cronos weapon or some new source of crit rate that could invalidate it. You're just hurting yourself in the long run by going for the Cronos. You might have a very small short-term game at low enhancement levels, but you're really going to regret it long term, especially if you're heavily invested in it, and if you're buying the duplicate packs for the 80 US per piece. Like it's going to be a big mistake in the long term. Think dark, think fire, think earth. These are the elements that are the best elements in the game, and you should really just kind of focus on that.